The bride is trembling, the groom is smiling, and then destiny kicks the church doors open. White lace, cold October air, dead-eyed men in black suits, everything in that church feels like a funeral pretending to be a wedding. Elena walks forward as if toward her own execution, while Victor watches with the calm hunger of a man who thinks he has already won. Then Adrian appears, carved from shadow and gunpowder, and with one outstretched hand he turns a marriage ceremony into a battlefield. One step later, the bride becomes the spark that sets the city on fire.
For most, a wedding aisle is a path to communion. For Elena Cross, it was the final clause in a grim contract, her body the closing payment. Her very being was the currency, her autonomy the collateral. At the altar, Victor Drazzi awaited not a wife, but an asset. Within the cold sanctity of a Chicago church, surrounded by men of buried violences, a chilling clarity descended. This was no sacrament. It was an ownership transfer. But when a brutal intrusion desecrated the ceremony and a stranger offered an egress, she faced a choice with two exits: total erasure or a violent liberation. The aftershocks of her decision were destined to tremble through the city's dark foundations. Chicago's October wind was a blade against the skin. A sensation Elena Cross understood through the fragile lace of her gown. The white dress, an emblem of purity, felt like a perverse irony. She was chattel in a transaction. Her reflection in St. Augustine's anteroom was of an alien figure who had witnessed generations of true brides. She was not among them. The gown was a perfect fit, a detail her father had meticulously arranged. He had orchestrated every facet of this, save for the resilience of her will. "Mija, you look ethereal." Elena's jaw tightened at the sound. Carlos Cross occupies the doorway, his tailored suit a flimsy shield for the tremor that had become his shadow since his debts found Victor Drazzi. "Do not call me that." Elena's voice was a low, taut chord. "You forfeited that privilege when you used me to balance your ledger." Carlos recoiled but did not retreat. "This is more complicated." "It is precisely what it appears to be." She pivoted, the blaze in her eyes forcing him a step back. "You gambled it all. Our home, my mother's heirlooms, your very soul. When nothing remained, you wagered me." "Victor is a respectable man." "Victor is a predator." The word hung in the air, grotesque and absolute. "His commodities are weapons, narcotics, and terror. Half of Chicago fears him. The other half is on his payroll. And you are presenting me to him as a tribute." Carlos's expression hardened. "You fail to grasp these matters." "I grasp everything." Elena's voice became crystalline ice, a psychological armor forged for survival. "I grasp that you are a coward. I grasp that you would offer your own daughter as a sacrifice to escape the consequences of your weakness. And I grasp that, as of today, I consider myself an orphan." The words landed like physical blows. For a fleeting, desperate moment, she willed him to shatter, to beg, to reveal some path out. She yearned for a trace of the man he once was. But Carlos Cross was a vessel too hollowed by fear for remorse. "The ceremony is in 15 minutes, he stated, his voice devoid of warmth. "Do not be late." He turned and was gone. Elena confronted the mirror once more, meeting the gaze of the specter in white. The coiffure was not her own. The makeup was the work of an artist employed by Victor. The dress was worth more than 6 months of her earnings from the photo studio he had forced her to abandon. "The wives of men like Victor do not work," he had decreed. "They simply exist to obey." Her phone vibrated against her skin. A reckless impulse, a self-inflicted wound she ought to have ignored. But her hand acted before reason could intervene. The message was from Sarah, her closest friend, the sole voice who had raged against the insanity of this pact. "It's not over. I have the car. I have funds. Just give the signal." Elena's thumb paused over the screen. It seemed so simple. 3 letters. Y-E-S. Sarah would appear. They would vanish. But escape was a delusion. Victor Drazi did not misplace his acquisitions. Men of his kind possess long memories and even longer reaches. If she fled, the price would be paid by others. Sarah would be hunted. Carlos would be annihilated. She erased the text unanswered as the door opened once more. Victor's sister, Celeste, stood framed in the doorway, a woman whose couture was armor and whose smile was a sharpened blade. "It is time," she announced, her gaze appraising Elena like a new commodity. "Victor is waiting. He must be ecstatic." Celeste's smile remained fixed, but her eyes turned arctic. "Some advice. The sooner you accommodate your new reality, the less painful it will be. Victor is profoundly generous to those who please him and exceptionally cruel to those who do not." "Is that the narrative you tell yourself?" Elena met her stare. "To live with the deeds that put that shadow in your own eyes?" For a microsecond, Celeste's facade fractured. A glimmer of ancient, unhealed pain surfaced before it was suppressed by years of icy discipline. "You will learn," Celeste whispered. "One way or another, you will learn." She departed, leaving Elena alone with the solemn toll of the church bells. Her time had expired. She moved down the corridor, her body feeling alien, disconnected. At its end, Carlos was waiting to complete the delivery, to finalize the sale. The thought was both ugly and precise. "Elena," he began, "don't." She took his arm from sheer necessity, her gaze locked forward. "Just do not speak." The great sanctuary doors swung open. St. Augustine's was populated by a silent assembly of men in dark suits with vacant eyes. This was Victor's ecosystem. His enforcers, his kin, his dominion, her father's creditors were surely among them, observing their investment with grim satisfaction. And there at the altar was Victor Drazi. He was handsome in a predatory fashion, a composite of sharp angles and coiled power. At 42, he commanded a fortune built upon Chicago's every vice. His tuxedo was tailored to perfection, a second skin. He offered her a smile that never touched his eyes. His eyes were his most unsettling feature. They were dark, cold, and analytical, the way a man might appraise a new vehicle while probing its limitations. Elena willed her body onward. Left foot, right foot. Do not think, do not feel, simply proceed. The wedding march sounded like a funeral dirge to her ears. Halfway to the altar, she erred and met his gaze again. He winked. The casual, proprietary gesture demolished her fragile control. This was real. In moments, the law would chain her to this man who would possess her entirely, and there would be no escape. She was 3 pews from the altar when the church doors imploded. Not with an explosion, but the sound of splintering oak on stone was a concussive force that tore through the chapel. Every head turned. A man was silhouetted in the gray afternoon light. Tall, formidable, his black suit designed for function over ceremony. He did not run. He advanced down the aisle with a terrifying serenity that vacuumed the air from Elena's lungs. The sanctuary descended into chaos. Victor's men produced firearms from their jackets. Guests shrieked and scrambled for cover between the pews. The priest retreated from the altar, his hands raised in surrender. The stranger's pace never faltered. "Adrian." Victor's voice cut through the noise like a shard of glass. "You have immense audacity to show your face here." So, a history existed between them. The man, Adrian, halted directly beside Elena. Up close, his face was hard, as if carved from the memory of violence. A fine scar intersected his left eyebrow. His eyes were nearly black, and when they met Elena's, she felt it like a physical impact. "Elena Cross," he said, his voice a low rumble more menacing than any shout. "You have a choice." "She is going nowhere with you," Victor snarled from the altar. "She is mine, paid for in full." "A person cannot be owned." Adrian's gaze remained locked on Elena's. "Regardless of the deals that were struck, you are not property. You are a woman and you have a choice." Elena's heart hammered her ribs. A ring of Victor's men had now formed around them, weapons leveled, awaiting the command. This man was poised to die for disrupting a wedding, and he was offering her a life. "Who are you?" she whispered. "I'm the man leaving this church," Adrian replied and extended his hand. "The only variable is whether you leave with me." "This is insanity," Carlos hissed. "Elena, stay where you are." "Your input is no longer relevant," Adrian declared, his gaze sweeping over Carlos with absolute contempt before returning to Elena. "The decision is hers." "If you go with him," Victor's voice lowered to a lethal whisper, "I will hunt you. I will force you to watch as I incinerate everything you cherish, and then you will beg me to take you back." Elena felt the certainty in his oath. Victor Drodzy did not make hollow threats, but trapped between the man who had purchased her and the stranger promising deliverance, one truth was clear. In either world, the life she had known was already destroyed. To marry Victor was to accept erasure, a slow suffocation of every dream and element of herself under the crushing weight of his ownership. To flee with Adrian was to risk a swift, clinical death, a bullet to the head, a blade between the ribs. Between these two conclusions, only one allowed her to die as herself. Elena's fingers found Adrian's. His grasp was warm and solid, a connection that sent a current through her, reconfiguring reality. A guttural noise tore from Victor, part command, part curse. The distinction was lost as the sanctuary erupted. But Adrian was already in motion, pulling Elena into his shadow, his body a human bulwark as he began their retreat. Not towards the main doors. That route was sealed by hostiles. He moved instead toward the side altar, for a small door leading to the priest's sacristy. The sharp report of gunfire echoed. Elena registered the sound of splintering wood and stained glass imploding. A scream erupted, its source unidentifiable. A guest or one of Victor's men. Adrian kicked the side door off its hinges and propelled her through. They were plunged into a narrow, shadowed corridor, heavy with the scent of incense and aged timber. At the far end, another door promised the street. "Wait!" Elena gasped, struggling for breath. The wedding dress was a trap, its lace and tulle caging her limbs. The heels made running impossible. "I can't." Without a word, Adrian stooped and ripped the lower half of her gown away with a single, violent tear. Within the narrow corridor, the rending of fabric echoed with the finality of a gunshot. Paralyzed, Elena could only stare at him, her gown now a shredded testament to the life just torn from her. "An improvement," he noted, his grip retaking hers, propelling her forward. They erupted onto a side street where a dark SUV sat waiting, a predator at rest. Adrian pulled the door open, depositing Elena inside with calculated force before following. "Drive," he commanded. The chauffeur, a sharp man with silver in his hair, obeyed instantly. The vehicle launched from the curb as Victor's men flooded the church entrance, brandishing their weapons. Elena registered more gunfire and a violent swerve. But they were already weaving through Chicago traffic with a surgical brutality born of immense practice. She was pinned against Adrian's side, his arm a rigid bulwark across her, his form positioned to absorb any bullet that might breach the vehicle. Her heart became a frantic, caged thing, beating against the confines of her ribs. Her hands trembled so intensely, she clenched them into fists. What? The word fractured. She tried again. What was that? You experienced a wedding, Adrian observed, his voice tinged with a dark, caustic wit, followed by an annulment. My regards. A laugh tore from Elena's throat. It was a grotesque, fractured sound, a pure expression of trauma where humor could find no purchase, but she was helpless to contain it. Hysteria poured out of her in ragged, sobbing waves. Adrian made no move to calm her. He remained a fixed point, allowing the psychological storm to expend its energy. Once the laughter subsided into a shivering, vacant silence, Elena truly looked at him. Why? She demanded. What was the purpose of this chaos? Adrian's face was an unreadable cipher. Because Victor Drazi is a malignancy, and no one should be delivered to such a predator. You have no idea who I am. I possess all pertinent information. The statement was both an enigma and a profound warning. Before Elena could press further, the driver interjected. We have company, 2 vehicles maintaining distance. Elena craned her neck to see 2 black sedans maneuvering through traffic, systematically closing the gap. Time to the sanctuary, Adrian inquired. 20 minutes, perhaps 15 if we employ aggressive maneuvers. Be aggressive. The SUV leaped ahead, throwing Elena against the seat. They carved a path through Chicago's urban labyrinth, ignoring stoplights and utilizing alleyways with a geographer's precision, as if the driver held a mental map of every city escape route. Victor's pursuers kept pace. Marcus, Adrian said to the driver, his calm a stark anomaly in the chaos. Upon reaching Lakeshore Drive, ensure they are removed permanently. Elena's fingers bit into the upholstery. What kind of people are you? We are the variable that kept you alive, Marcus replied from the driver's seat. For any further clarification, you will need to consult him. My function is to drive. They merged onto Lakeshore Drive at 70 miles per hour. The Chicago skyline dissolved into an abstract smear of steel and glass beneath a leaden sky. Marcus navigated the congested lanes with razor-thin margins, compelling Elena to squeeze her eyes shut. When she dared to look again, the pursuing vehicles had vanished. Target neutralized at the interchange, Marcus stated. We are clear. The tension in Adrian's arm finally eased its hold on her. Excellent, remain vigilant. Victor's ambition is a known constant. Victor is going to kill me, Elena stated, a primal terror eclipsing her shock. He will kill every one of us. He will make the attempt, Adrian conceded. But for that to occur, he must first locate us. This is Chicago. He controls 50% of this entire city. And I, the other 50. Adrian's gaze met hers, and in their depths, she perceived something more unsettling than Victor's nihilism, absolute certainty, an unwavering conviction. Victor Drazi wields immense power, but he is no deity. To reach you, his path must cross mine. But why? Elena asked once more, her voice thin with desperation. Why does this concern you? What am I to you? Adrian turned his profile to the window, toward the vast, cold expanse of the lake. You are an individual who deserved a fate other than being property, he said at last. It was an explanation that explained nothing, yet it was all he would offer. They sped north, leaving the city's core behind them. The architecture grew more expansive, spaced farther apart as nature began to reclaim the concrete. Finally, Marcus guided them onto a private access road that sliced through dense woods, terminating at a gate worthy of a military installation. Marcus keyed in a code. The gate retracted. Beyond it, Elena beheld the structure. It was a severe monument of stone and glass carved into a lakeside hill. It was simultaneously beautiful and frigid, fortified by high walls, surveillance cameras, and men in dark suits who observed their arrival with impassive, professional gazes. "Welcome home," Adrian murmured, and the chilling inflection he gave the word made the fine hairs on her arms stand up. This was no home. It was a fortress. She had merely exchanged one form of captivity for another. Marcus halted the vehicle at the main entrance. Adrian was out and opening her door before she could react, extending his hand. She paused. That same hand had extracted her from the church, from Victor, and into this terrifying void. Yet what alternative remained? She took it, allowing his assistance. The October air was keener here, an icy wind off the lake that sliced through her tattered dress. She was frozen, terrified, and so profoundly disoriented that her sense of direction had vanished. Adrian removed his suit jacket, draping it over her shoulders. It carried his body heat and the scent of expensive cologne and cordite. "Come," he urged. "Let us go inside." The mansion's interior was as formidable as its facade, a curated space of polished rock, austere modern art, and perfect furnishings. Elena barely registered her surroundings. Her focus was fixed in the figures of the main room. 4 individuals, 3 men and a woman, stood clad in dark, functional attire, their expressions a mixture of clinical curiosity and overt skepticism. "This is the asset?" the woman inquired. She appeared to be in her 30s, with dark hair in a severe knot and eyes that seemed to perform a clinical dissection of everything they saw. "She is underwhelming." "She presents as an individual who just escaped Victor Drazi's grasp," Adrian replied, his voice a clear threat. "That suggests she is either remarkably courageous or suicidally reckless. Regardless, she is now under my protection. Disseminate the directive. Any operative who engages her without my explicit clearance will answer to me." The very temperature of the room seemed to plummet by 10 degrees. It struck Elena then. These people did not merely respect Adrian. They feared him. What world had she entered? Adrian added, "escort Elena to the guest wing. Ensure she has whatever she requires, clothing, food, anything, and post a guard at her door." "To contain her or to repel others?" Ree asked. "Both!" A cold dread solidified in Elena's stomach. "I am a prisoner." "You are protected," Adrian corrected her, his voice devoid of emotion. "A distinction exists." "Does it?" Elena gathered his jacket more tightly around herself. "Because from my current perspective, the two concepts feel indistinguishable." For the first time, a trace of something akin to respect entered Adrian's eyes. "A fair point. Allow me then to be direct. You are not being held captive. You are free to depart at any moment. You could walk through that door right now." Elena's gaze shot to the door and back to him. "And Victor's men would execute me before I made it to the road. So my freedom is a theoretical construct." "You are at liberty to make your own decision," Adrian stated. "But decisions carry consequences. Remain, and you will survive. Depart, and you will die. That is not my control over you. It is simply the nature of your reality." It was, Elena had to concede, a mercilessly logical assessment that only intensified her despair. "For how long?" she whispered. "How long is my confinement until Victor relinquishes his claim, until he chooses to forget me?" Adrian's expression turned grim. "Victor never relinquishes anything, and he never forgets. The duration, therefore, is indefinite." Elena felt the last of her adrenaline recede, leaving her vacant and exhausted. Her legs began to shake, and she had to tense her muscles to stay upright. Ree moved closer, her features softening almost imperceptibly. "Come," she said, her voice now softer. "The subject requires stabilization. We'll provide nourishment and washing facilities." Elena's immediate impulse was to resist, to insist on answers, to make sense of the utter ruin of her life. But Ree's clinical evaluation was accurate. She was near collapse. Her equilibrium was gone, her vision narrowing. "Understood," she yielded. Ree guided her through the vast residence, up a sweeping staircase, and down a hall lined with closed doors. The suite she was given was more spacious than her previous apartment. It comprised a bedroom, a bathroom, and a lounge, all decorated in a muted palette intended to soothe, but which felt sterile. "The sanitation area is through there," Ree indicated. "Someone will bring attire in your size. Dinner is served at 1900 hours, should you wish to join us, or it can be brought here." "I will eat here," Elena said. The thought of feigning normalcy at a table with Adrian and his operatives was more than she could bear. Ree gave a simple nod. "As you wish. And Elena, for what it's worth, you chose correctly. Victor would have destroyed you." As a contrast to this, Elena's gesture encompassed her opulent prison. "Yes," Ree stated, her tone flat and final. "As a contrast to this." She departed, and Elena noted the quiet latch of the door, followed moments later by the sound of boots assuming a stationary post outside, a sentry for her safety and her containment. At the window, Elena confronted a reflection of her own condition. The lake. It was a sprawling, desolate expanse of gray, its surface agitated by the wind, an entity both feral and confined. The water, a vessel of contained chaos, could rush to any shore, yet remain eternally itself. She recognized the paradox. A vibration from within the purse Celeste had given her, could that have been only this morning, disrupted the moment. Time had become a distorted, fluid concept. The message read, "Sarah, where are you? Your father says you ran off with a stranger, and Victor is furious. Please confirm you are safe." Elena beheld the text, a portal to a life now impossibly distant. How could one articulate this new reality? "I am safe," she finally composed. "I cannot talk right now. I will explain when I'm able. Do not worry." The words were a calculated falsehood, a necessary shield against Sarah's inevitable panic. What other response, however, could Elena have possibly constructed? As she stowed the phone, it illuminated with another message, this one from an unlisted number. "You have made a grave error, Elena, but my capacity for forgiveness is vast. Return in 24 hours, and this will be forgotten. After that, the offer is withdrawn. Victor." The tremor in her hand reignited. She scanned the text 3 times, her thoughts a maelstrom of calculation. Was it conceivable? Could he genuinely absolve her if she returned? Impossible. Victor Drazi never forgave. This was a baited snare, a gambit to lure her back into his dominion by her own volition. Once there, her captivity would be absolute. She erased the message and blocked its source. Then, with her hands still trembling and her psyche fracturing, she understood that immediate action was the only defense against a total collapse. Elena entered the bathroom and activated the shower. The water was punishingly hot, nearing the threshold of pain, yet she remained beneath the torrent until her skin flushed crimson and the last vestige of the church was scoured away, until she could inhale without sensing Victor's phantom ownership upon her. When she stepped out, enveloped in a towel of unfamiliar softness, she realized her room had been visited. A collection of garments was arranged on the bed, denim sweaters and undergarments still in their plastic seals, all in her size. The question of how they knew was the gateway to more profound, unsettling thoughts. What was the extent of Adrian's intelligence on her? How long had this entire extraction been in motion? And the central enigma, what was his ultimate objective? Elena donned the jeans and a muted gray sweater, both fitting with unnerving precision. Her bridal gown lay in a heap on the floor, a monument to a life unlived. She lifted it, registering the profound weight of the ruined silk, and a fierce, almost savage satisfaction surged within her. The dress was merely a costume for a role she had just violently abdicated. She discarded it into the wastebasket. A rap on the door caused her to recoil. "Yes, your dinner," a male voice announced. Elena opened it to a young man balancing a tray. He appeared no older than 25, with sandy hair and a gentle demeanor that felt profoundly dissonant in this clinical fortress. "My name is Ethan," he offered with a smile. "I'm the household coordinator. If you need anything at all, I'm your person." "A time machine?" Elena countered, the dark humor a small act of defiance. Ethan's smile widened. "We're currently out of stock. However, I can offer you pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans, and a slice of pie." Against all logic, Elena's stomach answered. She had consumed nothing since her morning coffee, too consumed by anxiety for sustenance. "Thank you," she accepted the tray. Ethan nodded and turned to depart, but then hesitated. "Listen, I know this is an extremely weird situation, but Adrian is a good man. It may not seem like it right now, but you are safe here, safer than you have been in a very long time." "How can you be so sure of that?" Elena challenged. "Because I know for a fact what Victor Drazi does to his possessions." Ethan's amiable mask dissolved. "And believe me, you do not want to learn that firsthand." He departed before Elena could probe further. She consumed the meal in solitude. The expertly prepared food registered as ash on her tongue. Through the window, the sun bled into the horizon, painting the lake in violent hues of orange and red. Beyond these walls, Victor was architecting his retribution. Within them, Adrian was architecting. What? What was his endgame for her? And from the depths of her own soul, Elena felt the nascent stirrings of an emotion long dormant. Not terror, not resignation, but a pure, unadulterated rage. She had been a commodity, bartered, traded, abducted, and caged. Her existence had been governed by men who perceived her as an object, a strategic asset, anything but a sovereign individual. That era was concluded. Elena Cross possessed no map for the future. Survival through the next week, month, or year was an unknown variable. She could not discern if Adrian was a rescuer or merely a new warden in a more opulent prison. But one truth had crystallized with absolute clarity. She was no longer chattel. Whatever trial was next, she would meet it standing. And if Victor Drazi or Adrian Vale or any other man perceived her as a pawn, they were poised to discover a painful truth. The prize they fought for had developed claws, and she was finally prepared to use them. As darkness saturated the lake, Elena Cross commenced the grim arithmetic of her own preservation. A dispute beneath her window had shattered a fragile, ghost-ridden sleep. Each creak of the house, each footstep in the hall had been a spike of cortisol, the certainty that Victor's forces had breached the perimeter. But the cold, anemic dawn arrived, and she was still breathing. It was a victory, however small and hollow. Approaching the window, she observed Adrian and Marcus on the lawn near the water's edge. Their voices were muted by the glass, but their forms communicated a clear dialect of discord. Marcus's hands carved through the air, his features a contorted mask of rage. Adrian remained a monolith, his face a neutral canvas, his posture one of simple observation. Then, a quiet utterance from Adrian stopped Marcus cold. Following a strained pause, Marcus delivered a curt nod and strode away, his spine a rigid column of submission. Adrian stayed, his focus locked on the water as though interrogating the waves for some elusive answer. Elena retreated from the window an instant before he might turn and discover her surveillance. The label of spy was a complication she could not afford. On the nightstand, her phone emitted a faint glow. 3 messages from anonymous numbers confirmed Victor's evolving strategy. "Time is running out, Elena. Your father begs me to bring you home. Shall I tell him you chose a stranger over family? I expected more from you. This is a disappointment." Elena deleted them all, denying him the victory of a response. To engage was to validate his psychological campaign, and its effectiveness was undeniable. A sharp knock at the door sent a tremor through her. "Who is it?" "It's Ree. Adrian wants you. Breakfast is in 20 minutes. It was not an invitation, Elena registered, but a summons. "I'll be right down," she replied. She showered, pulled on another set of borrowed clothes, and attempted to subdue her hair into a style that didn't betray a mind in a state of siege. The effort was futile. The woman in the glass had shadows etched beneath her eyes, skin like aged paper, and a hard-set mouth, a trait inherited from her mother in moments of fury. Her mother, gone 3 years now, was mercifully insulated from the knowledge that her husband would one day use their daughter as a human bargaining chip. In the stark light of morning, that ignorance felt like a form of grace. Elena tracked the aroma of coffee downstairs. The kitchen was a cold surgical theater of stainless steel and marble, entirely devoid of warmth. 6 figures occupied a long table, Adrian at its head, Marcus and Ree at his flanks, and 3 faces that were new to her. Every one of them turned as she entered the room. "Elena," Adrian's tone was flat, stripped of all affect. "Sit." The vacant chair was located at the table's opposite end, a deliberate island of quarantine. She occupied it, acutely aware of 6 pairs of eyes cataloging her every motion. Ethan materialized with a plate bearing eggs, bacon, and toast, presenting it with the same disarming smile from the previous night. "Coffee, please," Elena requested softly, his basic decency a small anchor in a room filled with predators. "For those who weren't here yesterday," Adrian started once Ethan had withdrawn. "This is Elena Cross. She is under my protection. You've met Ree and Marcus." He named the others, Nikolai, James, and Sophia. Nikolai was a brute chiseled from stone, a stark scar across his cheek, a testament to a violent history. James possessed the mien of a scholar, yet his eyes were constantly sweeping the room for unseen threats. Sophia, who appeared to be near Elena's own age, wore a smile that was both beautiful and predatory. The resistance was palpable. Nikolai, His Russian accent pronounced challenged the logic of sheltering her until Victor simply lost interest. Elena cut him off, stating with icy precision that men like Victor do not lose interest. They demand retribution. Nikolai remarked on her fire, and she retorted that she was, in fact, present and fully cognizant. Elena articulated the unspoken consensus that she was a liability. She confirmed this was true. She then framed her own status as that of an unwilling chess piece in a conflict between two alpha predators. The observation elicited a short, appreciative laugh from Sophia. "I like her," she declared. Marcus countered that audacity is no defense against a bullet. Adrian acknowledged the point, calling it a necessary beginning. He then directed his full attention to Elena. Outlining the parameters of her new existence, she was forbidden from leaving the property, from contacting anyone in her former life, and from using any unsanctioned electronic communication. The protocols were an architecture of invisibility designed to sever her from existence. Elena's coiled fist underscored her realization. This gilded cage was not for protection but for containment. Reframe this erasure as a necessity for life, announcing that Victor's predatory pursuit was now active. Chicago's criminal ecosystem was now mobilized, either to claim the bounty or to profit from its escalation. Her query about her price was met with a quiet sum from James, $200,000, alongside favors he noted were a currency more potent than money. This valuation was a grotesque parody of her former life, a $35,000 a year existence as a photographer's aide, mired in debt and paternal disappointment. Elena's astonishment was palpable. Adrian offered a clinical analysis. Her abduction was not personal, but a public demonstration against the violation of Victor's ownership. He clarified that her identity was secondary. She was merely the contested asset. The intellectual framing felt disconnected from the visceral terror she was experiencing. Adrian elaborated that for a pathological narcissist like Victor, commerce and ego are indivisible. An assault on one precipitates a war on both. By abandoning him publicly, she had inflicted the deepest possible narcissistic injury. A venomous flicker of satisfaction briefly illuminated Elena's expression. Marcus cautioned that her smirk signaled a profound failure to grasp her mortal peril. When a figure like Victor suffers public humiliation, his retribution is always corporeal. Elena's voice fractured with anguish, arguing that his killing her at the ceremony would have been a mercy to all involved. Adrian calmly corrected this assumption, stating their entanglement predated the wedding by a significant margin. Her subsequent demand for clarity went unanswered as he redirected the focus to their immediate vulnerabilities. Marcus then reported that their perimeter surveillance had detected 2 vehicles executing reconnaissance patterns, methodically probing their fortifications. Adrian issued an immediate directive to intensify patrols, requiring constant observation of every potential ingress. Requested intelligence from their network of informants. James affirmed that Victor was leveraging his connections while maintaining plausible deniability. The ambient chatter, however, painted a portrait of a man consumed by a profound narcissistic fury. He was mobilizing assets and enforcers from New York, Detroit, and Miami, transforming a private grievance into an interstate manhunt. The information registered as a physical impact, making the monstrous scale of Victor's obsession terrifyingly tangible to Elena. Her suggestion to escape the country was a product of desperation and naivete. Adrian immediately dismantled the idea, detailing Victor's influence across 15 different nations and projecting her lifespan at less than 48 hours if she fled. Elena's next question probed the nature of her captivity. Was she to remain his ward indefinitely? The objective, Adrian clarified, was the complete neutralization of the threat. A cynical laugh escaped her. She understood the euphemism for what it was, a plan to assassinate him. Adrian allowed that it was one of several contingencies, noting that Victor's organization possessed structural weaknesses ripe for exploitation. She labeled it extortion. Adrian termed it survival. The absolute resolve in his gaze defied any challenge to the bleak scenario he presented. He compelled her to confront the reality of Victor's intentions. Not a swift end, but a meticulously planned, extended agony. As this harrowing truth settled into her consciousness, Elena's defiance finally shattered. Her acquiescence was not merely a surrender to fear, but a devastating acceptance that every decision, from her father's compulsions to her own flight, had forged the very structure of her confinement. She consented to their terms. Upon her asking what they required, Adrian propelled a small data storage device toward her. He instructed her to recall an event 3 weeks prior, a corporate photography assignment at the Meridian Hotel. The memory surfaced as a vague impression of business attire and perfunctory greetings. Adrian then provided the critical context. 2 attendees, Senator Mitchell Carson and Victor Drazi, were featured together in multiple frames she had captured. Elena dismissed the notion that influential men would associate as unremarkable. James intervened, revealing that the senator was ostensibly spearheading a significant probe into illicit arms distribution. The individual he was captured with, James concluded, directs one of the most extensive weapons smuggling networks in the Midwest. The color drained from Elena's face as the implication became clear. Adrian affirmed her realization, tapping the drive containing her complete photographic record of the day. On a single, digitally enlarged image, a shipping manifest was partly discernible on a table behind the 2 men. It outlined a substantial transfer of armaments to clients of intense interest to federal agencies. He then clarified they did not need her to interpret what the photograph depicted. They required a total reconstruction of the environment, the precise positioning of every individual, overheard conversational fragments, any detail to rebuild the context. To Elena, the data drive felt like an armed explosive. Re-argued that Victor's murderous intent was already established. This device was a tool to incapacitate him, not a shield to protect her. Adrian posited that passivity was a more profound transgression than miscalculation. Ultimately, it was her own simmering rage at being objectified as Victor's possession that solidified her resolve. Victor's possessive pathology had catalyzed an equal and opposite resistance within her. Elena agreed to participate, but she would set the conditions, demanding intelligence as payment. Adrienne acknowledged her swift pivot to a transactional dynamic. She held his gaze, asking for the true motive behind his intervention at her wedding and his continued surveillance. The query hung in the tense atmosphere, a deliberate overreach. Adrian broke the charged silence, rose to his feet, and ordered her to accompany him. He guided her to an open-air terrace where hostile weather seemed to mirror his impending disclosure. The narrative began 3 years ago, with Victor Drazi attempting to encroach upon his territory. A supposed truce was violated when Victor summarily executed 4 of his trusted lieutenants in an act of profound treachery. Elena waited, sensing the story was incomplete. Then came the final, critical piece of the account. One of the murdered men was his younger brother. He dismissed her gesture of condolence, his voice devoid of emotion, as he stated his brother understood the inherent dangers. Victor's betrayal was an imbalance that could only be rectified by a slow, meticulous search for a vulnerability, and she, Elena grasped, represented that very weakness. Adrienne offered a correction. She was not a weakness, but a strategic opening, an inherent flaw in Victor's otherwise impenetrable facade. His gaze, dispassionate and assessing, met hers. He confessed that upon seeing her engagement announcement and recalling her from a previous encounter, he identified her as the unwitting instrument he required to gain leverage. A trace of disappointment shadowed her expression, the hope for a more chivalrous reason extinguished. "You didn't save me," she articulated. "You procured a resource." He acknowledged a convergence of motives, conceding that without her immense strategic value, he would have remained a spectator. Adrienne presented no veneer of heroism, a strategic decision to differentiate himself from the men who had defined her past. He articulated a stark reality. Her liberation was a secondary benefit, entirely distinct from any noble impulse. This calculated candor resonated with a woman long conditioned by layers of coercive deceit. Her question regarding her fate carried the classic undertones of a prisoner's uncertainty. Adrienne's answer was tactical, a pledge of non-possession designed to secure her cooperation, framing her future as emancipation rather than another form of servitude. When her eventual liberty was positioned as the ultimate prize, her skepticism was an expected response. Adrienne countered that his influence was psychological, not proprietary, a stark contrast to the coercive models employed by her father and Victor. He presented a binary choice: assist him in dismantling their common antagonist and thereby reclaim her own autonomy. This was not absolute freedom, but a managed alternative to certain ruin. As she scrutinized his expression, Elena found no artifice, only exhaustion and a deep, abiding animosity. Her conditional assent marked a crucial move to reclaim agency, an effort to impose order on this new power structure. She insisted on an operational role, a classic response to a state of complete disenfranchisement. Adrienne's denial, framed as a measure for her safety, registered to Elena as a familiar variant of masculine control. She perceived the state's security not as a shield, but as another form of enclosure, denouncing the repeating dynamic of men, her father, Victor, now him, directing the course of her existence. Her ultimatum, to wager her own safety on her own authority, was a statement of psychological sovereignty and a renunciation of her role as a passive object. She was choosing to author her own fate instead of merely enduring it. A subtle shift in Adrienne's expression betrayed a common survivor's ethos. He dismissed her proposition as dangerously idealistic. Elena countered with dispassionate reasoning, repurposing her cultivated skill of being inconspicuous, a professional asset, into a tactical advantage. Her inherent unobtrusiveness, she contended, granted her a proximity his armed operatives could never hope to attain. She was effectively converting her perceived liability into an indispensable strength. Their objectives, she argued, were symbiotically linked. Her access was more critical to his campaign than her testimony alone. Adrienne's protracted stare was a detached evaluation of her proposal. The faintest trace of a smile conceded respect for her strategic thinking. "Exceptionally courageous or utterly deranged," he observed quietly. A measure of each, she acknowledged. He reasserted authority by deferring the matter, giving an unequivocal command for her to be placed under guard. For Elena, this postponement itself was a significant victory, the establishment of a first strategic position within his hierarchy. Her clipped "fine" was an expression of pragmatic acceptance. She stipulated that her escort must not handle her as a delicate object of pity. Adrian delegated Sophia, a woman he described as constitutionally incapable of indulgence. Before departing, Elena inquired about his deceased brother, Daniel, a calculated maneuver to reframe their alliance as a mutual quest for retribution. Inside, she met Sophia, whose relaxed demeanor exuded a predator's latent energy. Sophia offered an immediate assessment of the preceding power play, categorizing Elena's action somewhere on a spectrum between reckless and brave. "You bargained for concessions from Adrian Vale," Sophia observed. "This implies you're either profoundly foolish or possess more courage than any man on this estate." Elena admitted the potential for both interpretations. Sophia's resulting laugh was a gesture of acknowledgement. She then began a walkthrough of the compound, describing it as a primer and threat assessment. Elena asked if the danger was internal. Sophia's demeanor hardened as she confirmed that peril was a constant environmental factor, originating from every vector, both within and without. Trust, she stated unequivocally, was a privilege to be earned, not a given. This command hub served as the operations' central nervous system where all sensory data converged. Within it, a technician, Tommy, orchestrated a symphony of information streams. Sophia identified Elena as the catalyst for their heightened state of alert. Tommy confirmed this, reporting escalating hostile movements from Victor's men on the perimeter. When Elena pressed for specifics, he displayed thermal signatures of 3 separate scout teams from the prior night. Their objective, chillingly clear: to map the compound's weaknesses for a breach. Elena's fear took the form of a query about their defenses. Sophia's answer was brutally pragmatic. Vulnerabilities are inevitable, and survival is a race to mend them before the enemy can exploit them. The monitors seemed to reflect Elena's own sense of exposure. Her softly spoken question about their chances was met with a shared, knowing glance between Sophia and Tommy. Sophia's voice, now like steel, assured her that for Adrian, failure was not a conceivable reality. Sophia announced their next destination, the armory. Observing Elena's reluctance, she laid out the grim imperative that if the perimeter fell, self-defense would cease to be a choice. The unspoken reality was that Victor had deliberately kept her untrained. The concept of a weapon horrified Elena, yet she could not refute the cold calculus behind it. The armory was a subterranean vault, its walls a catalog of deadly tools. Sophia's order to select a handgun was met with Elena's faltering, immediate refusal. "This is a Glock 19 9mm, Sophia stated, enumerating its qualities like a litany. With practiced, decisive motions, she corrected Elena's grip and drilled her on the cardinal principles of firearm safety. A tremor began in Elena's hands. The weapon's weight felt immense, a profane object. Her whispered, "I can't do this," was countered by Sophia's unwavering command, reminding her that the only alternative was to be a victim once more, rendering her entire struggle meaningless. Elena's submission to the training signaled a profound psychological transformation. An hour in the basement range passed in a series of concussions. Her first shots were erratic, her body resisting the recoil. Gradually, however, repetition bred stability, and her aim began to find its mark. When it concluded, her ears rang, and a deep exhaustion settled into her spirit, far heavier than mere fatigue. Sophia's terse assessment, "not bad," was all the confirmation she required. Daily practice was now part of her routine. "In 1 week, you'll be proficient," Sophia promised. "In 1 month, your probability of survival increases." Elena prayed the skill would never be tested. "Our creed is to hope for the best, but prepare for the worst," Sophia said. Later, Elena consumed her meal on autopilot, her mind preoccupied with the memory of the gun. She felt herself splintering, the woman she used to be now a foreign ghost, whose life had been extinguished at that forsaken wedding. This new persona, forged in trauma and conflict, was still raw and volatile. For 4 days, a new rhythm of pain was established. Sophia conditioned her body, while an analyst named James deconstructed her psyche. They meticulously examined photographs from the event, searching for anomalies in the background. Her memory was a shattered mirror, a symptom of her trauma. She had been a professional, oblivious to the decay hidden in plain sight. On the 4th day, James froze an image, isolating a figure in a gray suit lurking at the periphery. James urged Elena to summon a memory of the man in the picture, but his face was a featureless blur, lost to the sensory chaos of that day. The analyst provided a name: Thomas Garrett, a man known for operating in legal gray areas. Elena recoiled from the new information, her mind already overloaded. James coolly observed that in their world, mere proximity was enough to implicate someone. He slid a tablet toward her, shifting the inquiry from the fallibility of memory to the certainty of data. The tablet displayed a faint, ghostly image of a spreadsheet. Elena admitted she had moved through the incident like a machine, a self-preservation instinct that had scrubbed the details. James suggested they attempt to awaken those dormant recollections, but her expression radiated doubt. The effort was cut short by Marcus's arrival, the grim set of his jaw broadcasting that the crisis had just escalated dramatically. A directive from their leader, Adrian, sent a bolt of ice through Elena's veins. The tension in the room became a palpable, coiling presence. With an unsettling detachment, Adrian announced that their enemy, Vittorio, was making his play. He projected the surveillance feed, which showed a brutal, efficient home invasion, a stark demonstration of Vittorio's power and his intent to inflict terror. The footage ended as a woman was dragged from the building. A flash of recognition curdled into nauseating shock. It was her colleague, Sarah. Adrian's voice cut through the horror, defining Vittoria's tactic. He was turning a friend into a psychological weapon. Immediately after, Vittorio's own message arrived containing a photo and an offer of a trade. It was a perfectly calibrated strike, aimed directly at Elena's psyche. Elena's focus fractured, fixating on the debt she felt she owed to Sarah's loyalty. The others immediately recognized the ploy for what it was: a trap designed to punish, not to negotiate. Elena looked to Adrian for a sliver of hope, but his eyes only reflected the grim truth. He gave the situation its proper name: a theater of cruelty produced by a malignant narcissist. Adrian dissected Vittorio's psychosis. He needed Elena to witness Sarah's demise before her own, to achieve the apex of psychological suffering. Adrian's strategy was brutally simple: do nothing. Elena recoiled from the cold logic, unable to view Sarah as a strategic piece. Adrian's counter-argument was cruel arithmetic. Acting would create 2 casualties, not 1. That calculation became a wound from which her spirit began to bleed. A crushing fusion of guilt and duty drove Elena to defy his order. "I am going alone," she stated, rejecting his command. A standoff charged the room, a silent conflict of wills. Adrian's voice lowered, laced with a terrifying finality. He informed her of the stark truth. Going alone was suicide, and it would not alter Sarah's fate by a single second. "This is my fault," Elena whispered, a toxic belief taking hold. Adrian intervened, attempting to reframe her perspective and assign blame to the true monster, Vittorio. He gripped her shoulders, compelling her to meet his gaze, and asked what Sarah would want. But her response revealed her broken logic. She had equated self-sacrifice with the highest form of loyalty. Adrian altered his strategy to harness her volatile impulse. He proposed a 48-hour period dedicated to intelligence gathering. Another operative concurred, pointing out that the artificial deadline was a classic tool to provoke a tactical error. Elena was a storm of agitation and despair. Her quiet question about what would happen to Sarah in those 48 hours revealed her raw, bottomless fear. Sophia offered a new paradigm, a single concept that cut through Elena's grief. "This is not a rescue," she said. "It is retribution." The tremor in Elena's hands ceased. A grim acceptance took hold. Adrian seized this pivotal shift, delegating tasks with sharp precision and converting their collective fear into directed action. James began the hunt for Vittorio's safe houses. Marcus started leveraging his contacts within the department. As the team mobilized with a new sharp focus, Elena remained frozen, a statue haunted by the images on the monitor. Adrian approached with a quiet word but was met with a venomous glare as she retreated deeper into her cavern of self-blame. She flagellated herself with hypotheticals, convinced that if only she had complied with Vittorio's demands, this nightmare would have been avoided. Adrian shattered her delusion with brutal honesty. Had she surrendered, Vittorio would have either methodically broken her mind or simply put a bullet in it. He pronounced her guilt a useless indulgence and ordered her to get to work. Numbly, she did as she was told. For the following 6 hours, the structured task of sifting through data was the only thing holding back the screams inside her. The work was a brittle shield. As the clock struck midnight, Vittorio attacked again. His message was a venomous whisper of blame, accompanied by a new photograph displaying fresh atrocities. He presented a schedule of future tortures, a metronome counting down the seconds to hell. A violent shudder racked Elena's body. James insisted it was a psychological ploy, but his words were empty reassurances. James stated the obvious. Vittorio's objective was to make her unstable, to fog her judgment until she made a fatal mistake. A look passed between them, a mutual acknowledgement that the threat was real. Elena excused herself to absorb the horror in private. When she returned, the terror in her eyes had been replaced by a glacial resolve. This cold new focus accelerated their search, and by morning, they had a target. It was a deserted warehouse in the industrial sector held by a shell corporation within Vittorio's network. "She's here," Adrian confirmed, his finger on a satellite feed from Tommy. "It's secluded, defensible, and allows for a quick exit." "What is our ingress?" Elena asked, running on more than 24 hours of caffeine and terror. "No," Adrian answered flatly. "Not yet. First we watch. Confirm she's inside. Tally the guards. Map the routes. We require 12 hours, perhaps less." He studied her. "I know you want to go now, but rushing in is how people die. She is already broken, and our failure will only break her further," Adrian stated with clinical precision. "Trust in my experience. Patience is how we will survive this." Elena wanted to object, but she lacked the scars that Adrian carried as his credentials. She nodded. It became the longest 12 hours of her life. Sensing her need for an outlet, Sophia took her to the firing range. Elena burned through 200 rounds, her aim improving as pure instinct took over. "You're getting good at this," Sophia remarked. "I hate it," Elena retorted, reloading. "Every shot feels like a rehearsal for killing." "Then don't rehearse." Sophia's counsel was stark. Instinct was a tool for survival, while conscious thought was a liability. To her, Elena was a survivor, not a killer, a crucial distinction. When pressed on the necessity of killing, Sophia's logic was chillingly pragmatic. Guilt is a luxury reserved for the living. This was a dark philosophy Elena could not accept. Yet she stored it away for a future she hoped would never arrive. As dusk settled, Marcus and Nikolai concluded their reconnaissance. "We have confirmation," Marcus reported. "The second floor, northwest corner. I registered 3 hostiles, but we must assume more are inside. Victor is absent. His caution is legendary. His second, a man named Ramos, is commanding." Adrienne's face hardened at the name. "Ramos. In many respects, he is more monstrous than Victor. He derives pleasure from his work." A cold sickness gripped Elena. The plan was the diversion. A primary team would breach the main entrance. A second team, with Reese and Sophia, would enter from the roof to retrieve Sarah. "And my role?" Elena pressed. "You will remain here." "That is entirely unacceptable." A muscle flexed in Adriana's jaw. "This is not a subject for debate." "Everything is a subject for debate. You taught me that," Elena countered, holding her position. "Sarah recognizes none of you. If traumatized, she will resist strangers, but she will trust me." "That trust is precisely what makes you a tactical vulnerability," Reese interjected. "Your emotional connection is a compromise that results in casualties." "Or it is the very thing that ensures Sarah's survival, as I am the one person who can establish a rapport." Elena's gaze locked with Adrienne's. "You said you wanted me to choose. This is my choice." After a long moment, Adrienne gave an unexpected nod. "Very well, but you adhere to protocol precisely, no deviation. You will follow Sophia's commands the instant she issues them." "Understood," Elena consented, a turbulent mix of dread and relief washing over her. "Then prepare yourself," Sophia said, her eyes clinically appraising. The next 120 minutes became a surreal haze of preparation. Sophia fitted Elena in black tactical gear, drilled her on the communications unit, and made her recite the plan until it became instinct. They issued Elena a Glock, the model from her training, with extra magazines that felt like anchors in her pockets. "The likelihood you will use it is low," Sophia observed, "but low is not zero." The drive to the warehouse was saturated with a heavy silence. Elena was wedged between Sophia and Reese, her heart beating a frantic rhythm against her ribs. In the front, Marcus drove as Adrienne reviewed the plan a final time. They stopped 3 blocks from the objective. At this hour, the industrial park was a dead zone, a landscape of hollowed structures and failing lights, perfect for a covert incursion. "Communications check," Adriana's voice was a whisper. Each agent responded. Elena's own voice wavered, but her signal was clear. The teams split. Marcus, Nikolai, and Adrienne advanced toward the main structure. Reese, Sophia, and Elena moved to the rear toward a rusted fire escape that clawed its way up the building. "Climb!" Sophia breathed, gesturing skyward. The ascent was terrifying. The metal groaned beneath them, but she reached the summit without making a sound. The warehouse roof was a desolate plain of gravel and refuse. A single access hatch offered entry to the structure below. Reese inspected the lock, produced a small kit, and bypassed it in less than 30 seconds. They dropped into complete darkness. Inside the building was a maze of hallways and vacant rooms, illuminated by the occasional naked bulb. Elena could hear voices from the floor below, guards or something worse. Her fingers tightened around the Glock. Following a mental schematic, Sophia led them through the second floor toward the northwest quadrant. They moved past skeletal machinery, stripped offices, and restrooms from a nightmare. Then Sophia raised a clenched fist, the signal to halt. A sliver of light from under a door ahead carried the low murmur of two men speaking. "Target location confirmed," Reese whispered into his microphone. "2 tangos on the exterior awaiting your signal." "Acknowledged," Adrian's voice returned. 30 seconds. The half-minute stretched into an eternity. Then, in the distance, Elena heard the sharp crack of the main door being breached, followed by shouts and gunfire. The 2 men guarding Sarah's room reacted instantly, drawing weapons as they moved toward the sound. Reese and Sophia were predators, swift and final. The guards were neutralized before they could utter a sound, one falling to Reese's rifle, the other disabled by Sophia in a blur of motion. "Clear," Sophia announced, testing the door. It was locked. Reese fired a single round into the lock. The report was explosive in the tight hallway. They entered the room, a confined space heavy with the scent of fear. Sarah was there, bound to a chair as the intelligence had described, her face bruised and swollen, her eyes wide with terror and disbelief. "Elena," she whispered. "I am here," Elena said, rushing to her. "I am here. I have you." Her hands trembled as she worked on the restraints at Sarah's wrists. They were cinched cruelly tight, cutting into her skin. "Faster!" Sophia urged, her gaze fixed on the doorway. "We may have 2 minutes before they send reinforcements." "I'm trying." Elena freed one of Sarah's hands, then the other. Sarah slumped forward into her arms. She felt unnervingly light, her body shaken by uncontrollable tremors. "Are you able to walk?" Reese asked. I believe so." A fresh burst of gunfire echoed from downstairs, closer this time, punctuated by organized, angry shouts. "We must go," Sophia said. "Now!" They half-carried Sarah between them, moving back through the bewildering corridors. Elena's world contracted to the sound of Sarah's ragged breathing and the frantic pounding in her own chest. From behind them came the thud of running feet. "Contact rear!" Reese yelled, turning and firing. The first pursuer went down, but the sound of more echoed from the floors below. Elena heard the violent, rhythmic ascent of boots on the staircase. "Move now!" Sophia screamed, her weapon spitting, suppressing fire. They struggled up to the roof hatch. Sarah's foot slipped for a terrifying moment before Elena's hand shot out, pulling her up with a surge of raw adrenaline. They emerged onto the rooftop, gasping in the biting wind, the fire escape a skeletal ladder offering freedom. "Go!" Reese commanded. Their descent was a frantic, controlled fall, Sarah crying out with each jarring step. Behind them on the roof, silhouettes rose, weapons leveling. Sparks flew as rounds impacted the steel frame around them. Elena felt a bullet slice the air beside her ear just as they reached the ground. Marcus was there, the van's engine a low growl, the side door wide open. "Get inside!" he ordered. They collapsed into the vehicle. It lurched forward before the door was even closed, tires screaming as it pulled away. Elena cradled Sarah, who sobbed into her shoulder, a shattered but living person. "We made it," Elena murmured, the words a comfort to them both. "You are safe now. I have you." The warehouse faded behind them, but its shadow remained. "We are not proceeding to the mansion." "A predictable maneuver," Adrian said from the passenger seat, his voice coiled with adrenaline. "Victor is aware she is with us. He will anticipate our return to the primary base. We are going to the safe house. Elena barely processed his words. Her focus was entirely on Sarah, who had gone silent, her body rigid in Elena's embrace. Shock, she assumed, or something worse. She requires a doctor, Elena stated. We have one at the safe house, Reese answered, already on her phone. Dr. Chen, he is discreet. I am contacting him now. The safe house was a unit in a generic apartment building in an unremarkable district, a place designed to be overlooked. Marcus drove them into a subterranean garage, and they used a service elevator to bring Sarah upstairs, evading all cameras. The safe house was a sterile, impersonal environment built for temporary use. Elena led Sarah to a sofa, keeping a grounding hand on her shoulder. Sarah displayed the classic symptoms of severe trauma: a 1,000-yard stare and shallow, rapid breathing. Elena tried to soothe her. Sarah, it's me. You are safe now. For an instant, recognition flickered in her eyes, followed by a gut-wrenching sob. She finally articulated the psychological torture they had inflicted, a lie crafted to break her spirit. They told me you were dead, Sarah choked out. They said Victor killed you. And it was entirely my fault. Elena immediately countered the poison. None of this is your fault. Do you understand? Before Sarah could reply, a doctor, an Asian man in his 60s named Dr. Chen, entered. He approached Sarah with a calm professionalism, his eyes already assessing the scope of her injuries. I must take a look at her, he said gently. Elena retreated, watching his careful, methodical examination. Sarah flinched at his touch but offered no resistance. The doctor delivered his diagnosis without preamble. 2 fractured ribs, a probable concussion, and numerous contusions and lacerations. Nothing that requires stitches. The medic cataloged the physical symptoms of neglect, but confirmed her underlying stability. In his prognosis, he delineated 2 separate trajectories of healing, one for the body, one for the psyche. Her physical self was expected to recover. Her psychological restoration, however, was an unknown territory obscured by a vacant expression. He treated her wounds, his work performed on a silent, desensitized form. Elena's steadfast presence offered the only tangible point of connection. His final directive was clinical: 2 days of rest with close monitoring for any regression. Notify me of any development, he instructed, departing as discreetly as he arrived. Elsewhere, the hushed, intense exchange between Adrian, Marcus, and Nikolai forged a blueprint for retribution and resolution. Elena remained detached, her world contracting to Sarah's immediate needs as she led her to the shower. The water cleansed the physical residue of her capture, yet the deeper architecture of her trauma remained untouched, a catatonic stillness defining her posture. Encased in oversized clothing, Sarah was escorted to a bed. Elena's quiet suggestion to sleep triggered a primal wave of terror. Sarah's grip on her wrist was a vice, her voice a raw entreaty. Don't leave me. Elena offered reassurance, staying by her side. Eventually, the sheer gravity of her ordeal pulled Sarah into unconsciousness, her hold loosening. Her rest was a landscape of remembered violence, punctuated by involuntary spasms and the silent evidence of tears. Elena confronted the specific gravity of her own role in this outcome, a culpability separate from Victor's engineered narrative. Victor's sadism was his own, yet she had constructed the arena where it was performed. Her decisions had placed Sarah in his orbit. This moment of bleak introspection was interrupted by Adrian's quiet arrival. He inquired about Sarah, and Elena's response was a triptych of brutal facts: asleep, broken, alive. Adrian's attempt at consolation was met with a wall of cold self-recrimination. He framed the rescue as their collective success, but her mind had already shifted to tactical analysis, deconstructing Victor's narcissistic pathology and his inevitable brutal response. "He will unleash his entire arsenal now," she declared. Adrienne conceded the point, detailing their preemptive strategy to neutralize the threat before Victor could consolidate his forces. Their leverage was a dossier of incriminating photos that connected Victor to a trinity of federal crimes, from arms dealing to conspiracy for murder. With a cooperating witness, the objective was his complete neutralization. This strategic checkmate, however, brought Elena no satisfaction, only a profound sense of emptiness. The coordinated federal operations were set for dawn. "By noon tomorrow, Victor Drazzi will be in federal custody," Adrienne stated with absolute conviction. "The case is airtight." But Elena's history was a lesson in the fragility of supposed certainties. She redirected the conversation to the human variable. "And Sarah?" The young woman was now a key witness, her identity marking her for elimination. Adrienne outlined the established procedure: a new identity, a new life, and federal protection. He then proposed his own security detail as a substitute, an offer that sounded to Elena like the construction of a different kind of prison. "Safety is not incarceration," Adrienne countered, his voice sharpened with an unfamiliar edge. "I am offering her a chance to survive." Elena systematically deconstructed his premise, reframing their entire alliance as a starkly transactional arrangement. "You required an asset, and you acquired me. You required leverage, and you deployed me." She perceived his protective gestures as mere ornamentation on this foundational exchange. The accusation visibly hardened Adriana's expression. "Is that truly what you believe this is?" Yet his ultimate motivations remained an uncharted landscape between them. With a terse recommendation to rest, Adrienne departed, leaving the atmosphere charged with unspoken conflict. Sleep was a state Elena could not permit herself as her mind dissected Victor's methods. She recognized that his psychological manipulation, the staged death and weaponized guilt, was an instrument far more potent than physical violence. As if summoned by the thought, a scream pierced the silence. Sarah was in the grip of a night terror. Elena was at her side in an instant, her voice a low, grounding frequency in the maelstrom. "You're safe." After several tense minutes, Sarah's convulsions began to ease as the panic ebbed. This was followed by the predictable tide of self-blame, a direct symptom of Victor's psychological poison. "I'm so sorry," she repeated, a broken mantra. When Elena tried to absolve her, Sarah responded with a raw, hysterical laugh and a confession. She had divulged information. Under duress, she had given up small, intimate details of Elena's daily patterns. Sarah, however, understood the tactical value of such minutiae to a predator like Victor. He wanted to know. Elena compartmentalized the intelligence failure, focusing solely on the fact of Sarah's survival. She spoke hollow reassurances, while a silent secondary process initiated a new threat calculation. Sarah's admission signified that Victor could now weaponize Elena's personal routines, transforming her safe spaces into kill zones. Entrusting Sarah to Sophia's care, she found Adrian, Marcus, and James gathered before a laptop. "The raids commence in 20 minutes, James reported. federal assets are in position at all 6 locations. A confidential source provided them with a live video stream. The screen showed operators in tactical attire advancing through a state building. The primary target was Victor's personal residence. A cold apprehension coiled in Elena's stomach. She recognized the estate from photographs, the gilded prison designed for her post-marriage. It represented a landscape of profound psychological dread, a future from which Adrian had delivered her. Tactical units breached the entrance, moving with weapons ready into a vast, unmoving interior. The home was utterly still. A mausoleum. "He's gone," James voiced, his tone tight with strain. Marcus was already on the phone, his features solidifying as he processed the incoming report. "Negative at all targets," Marcus confirmed, announcing a total systemic collapse. His residence, his offices, all swept clean. Victor and his entire command structure had evaporated. "He knew," Adrian observed, his voice a study in lethal tranquility. Someone warned him. Operational knowledge was restricted to this unit and the federal task force, which implies a compromise. Adrian analyzed, his gaze sweeping the room. The poison of that implication filled the air. A traitor in their midst meant no place was safe, no plan secure. "We find the source," Ree said, her voice cutting through the tension from the doorway, "before we start counting bodies." "Agreed." "James, begin a full communications audit, past 48 hours. I want every anomaly," Adrian commanded, turning to Marcus. "Get the unit accounted for. Eyes on everyone until we know who we can trust." "You think it's one of us?" Nikolai's disbelief was sharp. "One of your people?" "I think Vittorio knows how to buy what he can't break, and $200,000 is a very persuasive argument." The accusation hung in the room, thick and suffocating. Elena felt a fresh wave of fear. The very team meant to protect her was now fractured. "The evidence," she asked, "isn't it enough to arrest him?" "They have to find him first," James answered grimly. "And Vittorio's a ghost when he wants to be." Elena's phone buzzed. She pulled it out, steeling herself for another one of Vittorio's threats. But the message was from her father. "Elena, Vittorio says this can all end if you come back. He's offering a full pardon. We can end this without more violence. Call me." She read the words, and a cold fury displaced her fear. Her father was brokering her life again, treating her autonomy as a commodity. She held the phone out to Adrian, its screen glowing. "He's using your father," he analyzed. "He's playing the part of the merciful man." The ploy was obvious, but it revealed everything. Vittorio's grip was failing. Your escape, followed by Sarah's rescue, was a wound to his ego. He was a cornered animal, desperate to reassert his power. Through some act of fake mercy? Elena's laugh was brittle. "That's hardly believable." "To his disciples it is. He can paint himself as the peaceful victim of our aggression, using it as a shield." Elena deleted the message, offering no reply. For the next several hours, paranoia was the only air to breathe. Tommy swept the rooms for bugs, while James hunted ghosts in the data streams. Adrian questioned each person one-on-one, looking for the barest hint of a lie. Elena sat with Sarah, who seemed like a ghost, devoid of all joy. "I have to go home," Sarah said at last. "It's not safe yet. The world outside is hostile." "This world right here is hostile," Sarah replied. "Your entire existence, this life in the shadows." Her hand gestured to their gilded cage. "I cannot live under this constant fear. I know. Please, stop apologizing." Sarah's voice had an edge Elena had never heard. "You are not the target of my anger. This isn't on you. It's the circumstances. Vittorio's sickness, your father's cowardice, and my own failures. Her voice cracked. Elena reached out, her touch a grounding force. You have incredible strength. To have survived is everything. I don't feel strong. I feel broken into pieces. Can't the pieces be put back together? Sarah whispered. I doubt I'll ever feel safe again. Every noise brings me back there. Her story ended on a shudder. Elena knew words were useless. She simply held her as the dam of grief finally broke. Much later, when exhaustion had dragged Sarah under, Elena found Adrian on the balcony, a silhouette against the city. The afternoon sun offered a cold, indifferent light, a perfect reflection of the atmosphere. Any progress? Elena inquired. None. He is either a phantom, or we are pursuing the wrong specter. Adrian's stare remained fixed on the horizon. Neither prospect is favorable. What is the strategy? We observe, and we endure. A man of Vittorio's vanity cannot remain in the shadows. His own ego will expose him, and we will be waiting. So we do nothing? We stay prepared, Adrian countered, his gaze meeting hers. Survival is 90% patience, 10% timing. This will not be the spectacular conclusion you imagine. I am not imagining any spectacle, Elena replied. I was hoping for closure. It is near. You continue to say that, yet he eludes our grasp every time. We remain perpetually one step behind. Elena folded her arms, a defensive posture. What if he is simply superior to us? What if he cannot be apprehended? Then we redefine the engagement, we cease the chase and compel him to come to us. Using me as the enticement? By engineering the perception that he is triumphant on our own terms. Elena scrutinized his face, seeking the flan behind his stoic veneer. You have an idea. The beginnings of one, Adrian affirmed. Vittorio needs you to restore his flawless public image, so we'll let him believe he is getting you back. Are you suggesting I walk directly to him? I am suggesting he believes you are. The meeting will be public, controlled. He will think he has succeeded, but he'll be entering a federal snare. The risk was extraordinary, but she could see no other path. And if it goes wrong, she queried, I will extract you as I did before. That might be an impossibility. It will be done, Adrian insisted. His absolute conviction was unnerving, not reassuring. It suggested a man who would pay any price to uphold his promise, which troubled Elena immensely. Elena experienced a disquieting internal shift. A strange, protective feeling toward him began to form. This connection, perhaps a distorted symptom of her ordeal, was fundamentally changing their dynamic. I need some time to process this, she said. Of course, we have until... The vibration of his phone cut him off. He took the call, his entire body stiffening. When? Where? What are the casualties? A cold dread washed over Elena. Something was terribly amiss. Adrian ended the call. Vittorio attacked my South Side warehouse. He burned it down. 3 of my team were inside. There were no survivors. I understand. This is a deliberate escalation, a provocation designed to enrage me, to make me careless. Adrian's voice was completely flat, empty of any emotion. It is proving effective. What is your next move? What I should have done from the very start. End this. He moved toward the door. Stay here with Sarah. Do not leave the apartment. Marcus and Ree are on watch. I will be back after it's finished. Adrian? But he was already gone, with Nikolai and James beside him. Elena stood alone on the balcony, absorbing the weight of 3 more lives lost. When she re-entered, Marcus and Ree were speaking in low, grave tones. "What is his objective?" Elena asked. "Termination," Ree stated bluntly. "By all means required." "What does that signify precisely?" "Whatever is necessary." The ambiguous reply was more chilling than a specific one, as the true scale of Adrian's intentions started to become clear. Night arrived. Elena and Sarah sat in a strained silence, sleep an impossibility. The apartment felt as if it were shrinking. Near midnight, her phone screen lit up with a blocked number. She answered it on impulse. "Hello, Elena." Vittoria's voice was composed, refined, and entirely devoid of a soul. "It is time for us to speak directly. Just us. No violence, no witnesses. A simple conversation about how this concludes." Elena's hand clenched the phone. "How did you obtain this number?" "I always acquire what I desire. You, of all people, should grasp that." The silence grew heavy. "I am sending a location. Come by yourself. If Adrian or his people show up, Sarah will be killed. If you do not arrive within the hour, her family will be eliminated. Sarah is no longer in your possession." "That is true, but her mother is, and her brother is only a sophomore at Northern Illinois. It would be a great misfortune if they came to harm." A tide of nausea swept over Elena. "You are bluffing." "Are you prepared to wager their lives on that belief?" Vittorio's tone became ice. "1 hour, Elena. The coordinates are coming. Do not disappoint me." The line went dead. An instant later, a text came through with an address for a skyscraper in the city center. Her mind was racing. It was the precise trap Adrian had anticipated. Vittorio intended to kill her, but to refuse would condemn Sarah's family, a guilt she could never endure. She glanced at Sarah's door where the girl was sleeping. Overcome by fatigue, she observed her security team, Marcus and Ree, absorbed in surveillance footage, utterly oblivious to the ultimatum she had been given. If she told them, they would prevent her from going, and by doing so, condemn Sarah's family. Her course was undeniable. Elena committed to her decision, putting on her coat and checking for the Glock Sophia had insisted she carry before making for the door. "Where are you going?" Ree's inquiry was sharp. "The bathroom," Elena invented. "I can't rest." She skirted the hallway and exited the apartment into the Chicago darkness, advancing toward the tower and the final encounter. In that instant, a fundamental part of her was altered. She would cease to be a pawn, her existence a sequence of events controlled by others. She determined this conflict would resolve on her terms, even if mortality was the price. The high-rise was a black monument against the heavens, a cathedral of dominance. Elena studied it from across the street, the Glock a cold, substantial presence against her back. The driver for her ride had appeared unsettled, leaving her in the financial district at such an hour. Her phone had been vibrating ceaselessly since her departure, a flood of calls from Adrian, Marcus, and Ree, who were now aware she was missing. Each call was a plea to stop her from following through. Elena switched the device off and left it in a street-side trash can, severing their ability to influence her. A single security guard was stationed in the lobby, a young man with a worried expression. He received the floor number without a word, gesturing toward the elevators. "The penthouse is on 42, he stated. "Your entry has been cleared." She had foreseen this. Vittorio's reach was total. The elevator's ascent felt like a slow plunge into an abyss. In the mirrored surfaces, her reflection appeared as a pale, gaunt woman, pushed to her breaking point but resolute. That image was not the same woman who stood at an altar 2 weeks before. That woman's decisions had been made for her. This woman was entering a death trap of her own volition. There was an uncanny power in the act, a lucidity in confronting the end. The doors parted to reveal a space of dark wood and muted lighting. Vittorio stood in the center, his hands placed in the pockets of a bespoke suit. He looked identical to how he had in the church, collected in command lethal. But his eyes now contained a deeper, colder void. "Elena," he said, his tone conversational as if seeing an old acquaintance. "I am pleased you came. I was not entirely confident you would. You threatened a harmless family. I had no alternative." "There is always an alternative." Vittorio gestured to a pair of chairs by the window. "Sit down. Let us be civilized." "I will stand." "As you like." He approached the window, gazing down at the city's luminescence. "It is breathtaking, isn't it? All those insignificant lives, unaware of the world's true functions, of who is truly pulling the strings." "Is that how you perceive yourself?" Elena queried. "As superior, that your wealth and brutality make you important?" A small, joyless smile formed on Vittorio's lips. "My power affords me a freedom you cannot possibly imagine. Your life has been one cage after another, built by your father, by circumstance, by your own vulnerabilities. When Adrian Vale destroyed our wedding, you saw a rescuer. But he only moved you from a gilded prison to another kind of confinement. He is nothing like you. No, he is far more dangerous. My own cruelty is transparent, Adrian's is hidden by a veneer of honor. But we are carved from the same stone, men who seize what we desire and annihilate whatever stands in our way." Victor faced her. "The only distinction is that with me you would have possessed everything. Security. Comfort, security, and what has Adrian given you? A life of fleeing and concealment." "He gave me a choice," Elena retorted. "That is far more than you ever offered." "Choice?" Victor pronounced the word like venom. "Permit me to illustrate the consequence of your choices. Sarah assaulted because you fled. 3 of Adrian's men incinerated because you interfered in matters beyond your understanding. And now you are here, your last choice leading to your own demise. How has this liberty benefited you?" His words struck with more impact than she anticipated. He was right about the bloody outcome of her decisions. People had died, but that did not make him correct. "You were the one who hurt Sarah," Elena countered quietly. "You murdered those men. My choices did not pull the trigger. You did. This is about your loss of control. Someone told you no, and your brittle self-image could not tolerate it." Victor's expression became a stone-like mask. "Be careful with your words, Elena. Your life is subject to my will." "No, it is not. I am here because of your desperation." A sudden, piercing clarity cut through her fear. "The authorities are closing in. Your allies are abandoning you. Your whole empire is collapsing. You thought that by getting me back, by proving you still possessed me, you could fix it all. But that is over, Victor. The truth often arrives long before its acceptance." For a beat, Victor was motionless. Then a quiet rumble of genuine amusement vibrated in his chest. "You've developed a spine," he noted. "I'll grant you that. The girl I was engaged to would never have used such a tone." "The girl you were engaged to is a ghost. You extinguished her when you attempted to purchase her. A shame. Her presence will be missed." His hand slid into his jacket. Elena's own hand instinctively moved toward the Glock at her side, but he revealed only a phone. "Allow me to present something." He angled the screen, displaying a live video of Sarah's mother's house. 2 armed figures stood guard. A single phone call, Victor stated softly, and my operatives will enter. Sarah's mother will perish. Her brother will perish. Perhaps I'll command them to raise the entire structure, a dreadful accident. Elena's fingertips grazed the textured grip of her sidearm. You won't follow through. And what prevents me? What is your leverage? You require my cooperation. If they are gone, I have no incentive to obey you, and a woman with nothing left to lose is a formidable force. Victor weighed her logic. A valid argument. Therefore, we will strike a bargain. You return to my side, smiling for the press. We will claim Adrian manipulated you. We will marry. You will embody the part of my adoring wife, and Sarah's family will continue to live. I will even permit Adrian to survive, provided he remains out of my affairs. And I am to believe you will respect such an agreement? I expect you to comprehend that it is the most favorable one you will receive. Victor pocketed his phone. The alternative is that I begin eliminating everyone you care for, one by one, until you plead for me to take you, at which point I will kill them all regardless, simply to demonstrate my power. Elena's fist tightened around her pistol. She could draw, fire. It was possible she could neutralize him before his men could intervene. But that act would not ensure the safety of Sarah's family. It would not recall the men positioned at the house. First, I require confirmation of their safety, Elena stated. Withdraw your men. Let me confirm Sarah's family is secure, and only then will we negotiate. A faint smile played on Victor's lips. Astute, distrustful. I find this version of you far more compelling than that timid girl at the wedding. He produced his phone again. But no, you are not in a position to make demands. You have a choice. Accept my proposal or I initiate the call. The elevator behind her chimed. Elena pivoted, her heart racing, anticipating more guards. Instead, it was Adrian, flanked by Marcus and Nikolai, all of them armed. Step away from her, Victor. Adrian's voice was unnervingly calm. Victor's composure remained intact. I was anticipating your arrival. Did you imagine I would allow her to face this undefended? This was never a snare. Victor made a sweeping gesture across the suite. This is a conclusion. In one fashion or another, everything concludes this evening. I concur, Adrian replied. Then his gaze shifted to Elena. Are you harmed? No, she answered. But he has operatives at the home of Sarah's family. Had operatives, Marcus interjected. We extracted them 10 minutes ago. Her mother and brother are secure. A tide of relief washed over Elena, but Victor merely laughed. I should have anticipated it. Always so thorough, Adrian. It's admirable. Victor's hand returned to his coat, this time emerging with a pistol. But thoroughness is not invincibility. 3 additional shapes detached themselves from the room's deep shadows, men Elena had not previously perceived. Their firearms were aimed at Adrian's team. This is the scenario, Victor declared. Every person will lower their weapon with deliberate slowness, or we will discover who possesses superior reflexes. There are federal agents on the lower levels, Adrian said, his tone flat. 3 floors below, awaiting my go-ahead. If you discharge that weapon, they will ascend, and this situation ends for you. You are bluffing, Victor retorted. If you possessed federal support, you would have deployed them, not appeared yourself. I am not bluffing. Adrian's expression was unreadable. This was the strategy. To draw you into the open and let the government handle the aftermath. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty marred Victor's features. You're lying, am I? Adrian revealed his phone with his free hand. A simple press of a button could have concluded the standoff. Yet Adrian paused, ceding the stage to Elena to confront her tormentor. Victor's gaze fixed on her, viewing not a person but a prize. His possessiveness ignited something primal within her, a response ingrained in her very muscles. Her training seized control, her body moving faster than conscious thought. The gunshot echoed, the round tearing into Victor's shoulder and spinning him as his pistol clattered away. In that same moment, both security details commenced firing. The room detonated into a tempest of sound and movement. The noise was overwhelming, each report like a cannon's blast, and Elena recoiled by instinct. The gravity of her action attempted to breach her consciousness, but the will to survive forced it down. Marcus seized her, dragging her behind cover as the gunfight escalated. Amid the chaos, she saw Victor on the floor as his men were neutralized. The calculus of power had been violently and irrevocably altered. Adrian stood over Victor, the man who had sought to utterly possess Elena. A broken, maniacal laugh escaped Victor's lips, the sound of a narcissist witnessing the collapse of his own mythology, his belief in his own untouchability. Then Adrian placed the call. The approaching sirens were the sound that finally fractured Victor's delusion of control, igniting a flicker of panic in his eyes. Adrian began to recite the federal charges, each one a blow dismantling the legal fortress Victor had constructed around himself. The evidence against him was irrefutable: photographs, sworn testimony, a 5-year chronicle of illicit financial flows. Victor could only offer a powerless curse. As federal agents flooded the area, Adrian's team surrendered him. Throughout the ordeal, Victor's venomous gaze remained locked on Elena. He voiced one final threat, but the words were empty. He understood, on some level, that the game was already over. A federal official, Special Agent Chen, approached with a gentle demeanor to escort Elena away. Adrian's protective instinct flared, immediately questioning her legal status. Chen reassured him she was considered a witness, a victim, his tone measured and calm. Her body began to shake as the adrenaline finally receded from her system. When they received final confirmation that Sarah's family was genuinely secure, a wave of relief so immense washed over Elena that it left her speechless. As Victor was escorted out, he cast one final poisoned remark at Elena, attempting to frame her rescue as just another form of captivity. It was a textbook abuser's tactic designed to invalidate her agency. But Elena's quiet response, "I don't belong to anyone," was a subtle declaration of her own victory. The remainder of the night involved a lengthy debriefing, a painful verbal excavation of her ordeal. The sun was rising when Agent Chen finally transported her to a secure location. A new day was dawning. Inside, Elena was met by Sarah, whose alarm was visibly heightened by the bloodstains marking Elena's attire. The news of the man's capture breached a wall of contained emotion within Sarah. Elena drew her into an embrace, a moment of mutual release as both women started to process the ordeal. After Sarah composed herself, Elena sought out Adrian, compelled to build a coherent narrative from the night's chaotic events. She acknowledged her awareness of his surveillance, a truth he did not contest. When she expressed her thanks, he deflected, assigning her the credit for the decisive action. She discussed the violent act with a profound detachment, noting the lack of feeling she had anticipated, framing it as a mechanical necessity, a psyche shielding itself from horror. This struggle to articulate her emotional state was a textbook sign of acute trauma. Then his last toxic words reverberated in her mind. She articulated Victor's assertion that she had merely swapped one form of control for another. Following a long, charged silence, Adrian inquired what she truly believed. Elena admitted her initial assumption was that his motive was simple revenge, but that the dynamic had evolved. She began to dissect their connection, questioning if it was gratitude, a shared crisis, or something authentic, a classic presentation of a trauma bond. Her desire to depart was a clear move to construct a life of her own. "I am making my own choices now," she stated, her voice resolute. "A choice I should have made before it was made for me. I have to discover who I am outside the roles of a fugitive or a victim." Her gaze met his, steady. "Only then can we determine what this is, free from the weight of obligation or coercion." He observed her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, with a deliberate nod, Adrian acquiesced. Okay. That one word defied her expectation of an argument or a negotiation. He was releasing her, freeing her from any perceived debt, his voice strained with suppressed emotion. "I have no claim on you," he repeated. He posited a future contingent on her journey of self-discovery first. "We will discover if this is real or merely a byproduct of adrenaline and confinement." Elena registered the terms of this new arrangement. Terrifying, she acknowledged internally, but also liberating. She accepted the fear inherent in genuine autonomy. "It is complicated and not the fantasy I was once sold," she observed, "but it belongs to me." 3 weeks later, her process of healing was exhibited in a gallery in a new city. A collection of photographs documented a cross-country journey she undertook to reclaim her own narrative perspective. She maintained daily contact with Sarah, who had also begun therapy. For each woman, the trajectory toward recovery was becoming more defined. Sarah's recuperation was consistent. Elena established a crucial boundary, blocking her father's number and his attempts to breach it. A final, required severance. The unexpected acclaim for her art provided her with financial independence, the cornerstone of her new autonomy. Her life was now her own composition, a mix of pride, astonishment, and the constant low hum of anxiety that is a natural artifact of healing. It was utterly petrifying. This new existence was occasionally solitary, but it was also the most profoundly alive she had ever felt. A message came through from Adrian. It was considerate and supportive, honoring the distance she had requested. The subsequent exchange was light, creating a bond free from the unceasing strain of their situation. She typed, "I miss you." The admission was spontaneous, astonishing even herself, and registered as a true connection, not the trauma-based attachment she had feared. For 21 days, a deliberate suppression of Adrian's memory proved futile. Absence only amplified their bond. His message was a quiet anchor, an assurance of patience that recognized the crucible they had shared. A montage of their ordeal served as testament. The hallowed church, the inferno, the warehouse, a final shared sunrise. He was the architect of an illusory choice in her moment of powerlessness. The fundamental query persisted. Can a connection forged in turmoil find its footing in tranquility? Yet a future encounter was inevitable, a strategic move to seize authorship of her own history. This history might still feature the man who embodied both peril and protection, a classic traumatic bond. First, however, the reconstruction of her own identity demanded completion. Elena turned to her photographs, the tangible artifacts of her evolution. Outside, a downpour began, as if to purify the city. In this space, Elena Cross finally occupied the center of her own chronicle, a life forged on her terms. The conclusion was imperfect, but its authenticity was its ultimate validation.
The wind followed her like a warning. In the beginning, Elena stood inside white lace and candlelight, but there was nothing sacred about the room. The church was dressed as a sanctuary, though it behaved like a marketplace. Her father's hand on her arm was not tender, it was trembling. The man waiting at the altar did not look at her as a bride. He looked at her as a possession already delivered, and somewhere inside that terrible stillness, Elena understood the first law of tragic love and tragic power alike. The cruelest cages are often built before the door is even closed. Then came the interruption, not a miracle, not salvation, a disruption. Adrienne entered not as a prince, but as a storm, and in that storm, Elena was offered something small and terrifying: choice. Her whole life had been shaped by other people's fear, other people's greed, other people's plans, yet in one outstretched hand there was a possibility more frightening than death itself: responsibility for her own fate. She took it, and with that movement her old life died, not peacefully, not beautifully, but completely. The lesson her story leaves behind is heartbreakingly simple. A person is not reborn when the danger disappears. A person is reborn when they stop waiting for permission to live. Elena did not become strong because the world became kinder. She became strong because kindness never arrived and she chose to stand anyway. By the time she faces Victor at the end, the battle is no longer about who will possess her. It is about whether she believes she belongs to herself. That is why the ending matters. She does not run into another man's arms as her final refuge. She walks into uncertainty. She chooses distance, selfhood, silence, art, becoming. In the grammar of tragedy, that is not defeat. That is resurrection.